Hey everyone, give us about 2-3 minutes and we should have some more council members down. Good afternoon. I see more people coming. I'm very excited. Anita, will you do roll call? I know we have Councilmember Giarrusso and King there on their way.
Roll call. Councilmember Harris.
Here.
Councilmember Giarrusso. Councilmember King. Councilmember Green.
Present.
Councilmember Thomas. We do not yet have a quorum.
Okay, great. And I know that Baby and Birdman are coming, so maybe people are more excited about that than Mardi Gras. All right, so this is our second quality of life meeting for 2024, and today we will be hearing from the Health Department on a motion to renew the contract for the Mobile Crisis Intervention Unit, and then we'll also hear from Department of Parks and Parkways, who will present on enforcement during Mardi Gras. And Michael, thank you for all the work that I know that you've done over the weekend. I know you're probably tired. Just a public comments refresher. There's no public here, but public comments can be submitted online beforehand or in person. They will be limited to 1 comment per person per item, and they will be limited to 2 minutes when read aloud and be germane to the agenda item at hand. We've already done the roll call. Why don't we go ahead and have the Health Department come up and present on the Mobile Crisis Intervention Unit, and then we'll go ahead and vote on that item because it is a voting item. Y'all can come up to the table in front. And just for the record, we have Councilmember Giarrusso, who's walking up now, and Councilmember King is here as well, so we do have quorum.
Councilman Giarrusso was exploring the council chambers.
Go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then you can make your presentation.
Okay, great. Unfortunately, we don't actually have a presentation here. We're happy to answer questions about the contract proposal for MCIU and RHC going forward. But let me start. My name is Travers Kerr. I'm the manager of behavioral health programs at the New Orleans Health Department, and I'm joined here with my colleague Ben.
Yes, I'm Ben Winger. I'm the Mobile Crisis Unit Coordinator for the Health Department.
And just, I guess we can give a quick overview.
That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. The New Orleans Mobile Crisis Intervention Unit is operated by our partner, Resources for Human Development. RHD is what they go by, nonprofit organization. They provide 24/7 crisis response that's directly connected to our 911 system. So they're dispatched, just like police, fire, or EMS are, straight through our OPCD system for nonviolent mental health crises anytime in the city of New Orleans. The idea is that they're responding to nonviolent calls, so police don't actually have to go on those calls. It's a benefit to our police department to be able to provide police services, and a benefit, we believe, to our community as well, too, by providing people with mental health and behavioral health specialty expertise to people in real crises. And so this, what we're proposing is a contract extension for this group. It's 3 years, so we don't have to go through sort of the contract process each and every year. We're very pleased so far with the work that they're doing, and this would extend the contract through the end of 2026, I believe.
Yes.
And so we're happy to field any specific questions that you guys might have about it, but we're, yeah.
Councilmember Green.
I wouldn't mind a little bit more explanation for the public, because you always hear throughout the country that, the police responded and the situation escalated because there was law enforcement in place, and the people who were challenged are always challenged by law enforcement. Can you give the public an example of when they would call and how they would call to utilize the services here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. So this is for someone who's experiencing a mental health or behavioral health crisis. This could be someone themselves calling 911 saying, you know, I feel like I'm at the end of, feel like things are not going well for me right now, and I need some help. This could be a family member who's has a caretaker who is a caretaker for someone else who's in crisis and isn't quite sure what to do. Or this could be just a community member who's seeing somebody that is acting bizarrely and is concerned about their well-being. And so they can call 911, and 911 operators will actually triage the call. They'll determine whether or not, they'll ask questions about whether or not this is a mental health crisis, if there are weapons present, if the person is acting violently, if the person is in a medical emergency. And if they answer no to those questions, they should be dispatching our MCIU team. And so what you'll get is you'll get people who are trained in mental health crisis de-escalation. They will try and touch base with someone on the phone while they're en route to that particular instance. And then they'll meet that person on the scene and see how they can resolve that crisis in the least restrictive way possible. So this is really about bringing people trained in mental health crisis de-escalation to a scene to avoid having people in uniform, lights and sirens at times when people's reactions are a little bit volatile and might be heightened. And so we're hoping that we can sort of avoid a crisis escalating by bringing sort of the threat of arrest or something else to the scene by bringing people with mental health crisis expertise there.
But that's an important phrase that you mentioned, crisis escalation, and I think that sometimes the public wants to know a little bit more about that. If I see someone in my neighborhood who is walking around talking to themselves, that's not quite a crisis. But if they're walking around talking to themselves and they're unclothed, then that's a crisis. And the public has to determine the difference between the two.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily an easy thing to do.
Right.
But you can certainly call 911. We have a new option now where that person, right, if the call taker can indicate that there's no weapons present, that they're not a threat to themselves or others, they can get this crisis response team out to have a conversation with that individual and see what resources they can provide to them.
Can you give me an example of a successful intervention without necessarily mentioning either a street or a name? What someone needs to know the Mobile Crisis Intervention Unit can do based on a call that has been made?
Well, in the event that someone, let's say for the Mardi Gras season, they want to, someone is out there and they see someone acting bizarre, or they're, like you say, talking to themselves, or they're coming unclothed, or just out of the norm that you would see on Mardi Gras, if you can picture that. But in the event that they need to call, or they feel they need to call the police, or they need to call the emergency response system to get someone there to see about this person, they're going to call 911. We want the public regardless of the behavioral crisis, to determine the emergency. We're calling the emergency response system. So whatever their crisis is, or whatever the crisis is perceived to be, they determine the emergency, they dial 911, and the operator will screen the call, and professional clinical professionals will come out to see about the individual or the family. The family is also considered to be in crisis at that time as well. So we treat the whole family. We have resources within the community to assist them if they need it, and we can transport either way.
Can you talk about what you all do relative to the coroner's office in terms of people being, and give me the right expression, if the coroner intervenes, does it become a commitment? Wrong word. Give me the right words.
In that case, what you're talking about is an OPC or a PEC, a physician's emergency commitment, or order of protective custody, or at the police discretion, which is a excuse me, a 2853L, that they can transport the person in custody or against their will because they're a danger to themselves and they need hospitalization. Sometimes NOPD will call the mobile crisis unit for what we call a psychosocial consult, so they can be sure that they're making the right decisions. If there is an OPC present, the mobile crisis unit, if called out and they find out that the person has an OPC, then they will call back to dispatch and get NOPD to come out to transport. We do not transport under order of protective custody or PECs unless there's sometimes there are circumstances and nuances to this type of call service where if it's a child or something like that and it may be more traumatic to the child to be handcuffed or something like that, they have worked out in the field ways to get the child to the hospital without handcuffing them, escorting the mobile crisis unit or some other form of fashion.
If I can just add real quickly too, we're not able to transport on order of protective custody. That's something that law enforcement, our EMS teams do. So really the MCIU team is a team that can transport somebody and who's voluntarily willing to go with them. So if there is an order of protective custody by the coroner's office that's in place, they will have to actually get transported by a police unit or by New Orleans EMS.
Where do you transport someone?
Most oftentimes,
To where?
Most oftentimes it's to a hospital if the need is that great. And most often that hospital is University Medical Center.
Okay, what would you comment on relative to the police support that you get? Has it been good? Is the training good in place to address the issues that you address?
The police have supported us and welcomed us with open arms. We've also devised protocols for on-the-scene services, transfer of services. The police, they love us. They call on us, and it also helps them get back on the street faster. We've been getting nothing but good reviews from the police department.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council members? Yeah, I just have a couple questions. On average, how many calls for service do you get per week, per month?
That's a great question. We've seen about 7 calls a day in the first 7 months. That amounted to about 30% of all mental health calls to the 911 system. Just this last week, we actually saw closer to 9 calls a day. And so the calls for service are actually going up for MCIU, which is a good thing. And then as Ben alluded to too, we do have a handoff policy from NOPD to MCIU. So if a call comes in, and police are on the scene and they recognize that MCIU might be a better intervention than them, they're able to actually call for MCIU to come out and take over that form of care. And so those calls we learned from our CIT officer are actually going up over the last couple of months as well.
And you alluded to it. I mean, you actually take pressure off of NOPD when they don't necessarily need to intervene. This is your job, is to really get them back on the street to calls for other types of service. So it's a real benefit to the community. Do you only have one mobile crisis unit currently?
We have one contractor who operates 24/7.
Okay.
They have 3 vans, and most often they're using.
Excuse me.
Most often they're using those 3 vans throughout the middle part of the workday, and over the weekends as well too. They go down to about 2 teams late in the evening and 1 team overnight. So we're using 3 teams. They're usually in pairs of 2 at least, and supervised by a licensed clinical social worker. So it's about 3 teams during the middle of the day that we have on the street.
Great. And I feel like I have like a tingling, but having talked to Dr. Avegno, I think she mentioned about having Narcan on board. Do y'all have that on board?
Yes, they do have Narcan on board. They're trained as first responders are trained, CPR certified. You know, they basically are aligning themselves with the emergency response system. They have the basic training that they need and additional training within their scope of practice. I also have some statistical information if you would like to see that.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could hand it out after we're done. But and I'll get Matt to come get those from you and hand them out. But Anita, do you need to read this motion?
No, I do not.
Okay. And are there any online comments?
No, ma'am.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and move to add this to the consent agenda. I need a second.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Giarrusso. All in favor? 4 yeas. Thank you all for everything that you do. It's really a benefit, and I've told people to call y'all when they're encountering somebody who's acting in a way that y'all could help them. So those calls for service, some of those might be coming from directly from my staff telling people to give y'all a call.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate all of your support too. And the one thing I would like to add before we get up to is that the Vera Institute of Justice has actually helped us develop a community advisory board for this. And so we're working through our first board members orientation process, but hope to have that community advisory board up and running by the kind of late spring or summer to really be able to have community feedback in this particular service as well too. So we understand this is a kind of a new venture for us, and we have a lot to learn, and we certainly want to hear what people are experiencing on the street just to get better at what we do. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and Vera is great. So thank you again for everything that you do. Happy Mardi Gras.
Councilmember Harris, before they leave, since it was brought up, can you tell us, if you don't mind, some of the persons who are on the advisory board, or because I might want to see them in the community, I might see them at a community meeting, or if there's a place that I can go, I'd like to see it. That's all. The membership.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a 9-board membership right now. I don't have any of their names in front of us. We had a quick selection process between the Health Department and the Vera Institute, and then we're also having non-voting members from our first responder agencies, OPCD, the Health Department, on that board as well too. So,
Okay.
but I'll be happy to share that with you.
Yeah, share with me and other council members. We go to meetings all the time, and we might see somebody that I want to ask a question of directly, or make a suggestion to,
Yeah.
based on somebody who's a social, somebody I know in the world.
Absolutely.
And might I add that this Community Advisory Board annually will be reporting to the Quality of Life Committee to give you their views and their oversight of the MCIU program.
Okay.
That's wonderful. Thank you again. We'll go to approval of the minutes. I'm going to go ahead and move approval of the minutes from the January 22nd, 2024 meeting. Councilmember King seconded. All in favor? 4 yeas. Thank you. Next agenda item, Mardi Gras season tarp cleanup. I just got a text about some vigilante dad who pulled some tarps away from some folks, so.
Uh-oh. Next crisis.
You need no introduction, Michael, but if you could introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Good afternoon, Council. Michael Karam, Director of Parks and Parkways for the City of New Orleans.
We're ready when you are.
Councilmember Green, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Giarrusso, Councilmember King. Thank you for having me here today. It's good that I'm speaking to you in between Mardi Gras weekends, as we did have a good run on Friday, and so we've got some feedback to give to you and also to the public. Let's switch over to the ordinance, section 3433. This section of the Mardi Gras ordinances speaks to what parade goers can bring to the parade route and when they can bring it. The section that's highlighted is done so that the public and you all can know that this is the section that is associated with the Department of Parks and Parkways and Sanitation, and it speaks to the pendency of the parade and when personal items, including ladders, chairs, ice chests, and all personal items are allowed on the public right-of-way 4 hours before the start of the parade. And that this section was changed in 2020 so that there is a time period associated with the ordinance, and so there is a clear instruction to the public. The rest of the ordinance speaks to what can be brought to the parade route, and this section is, for the most part, to be enforced by NOPD and other public safety officials on the parade route. The Department of Parks and Parkways is able to perform these sweeps ahead of the parade route or ahead of the parade schedule, but if there are any items that are on the parade route that are not permitted, the public or anyone should speak to the NOPD officer on the block to address the removal of those items. And so let me just speak quickly to what those items are, because they are in this ordinance for public safety reasons. And much of it speaks to the prohibition of the cordoning off of public space for personal property into a private property. Ladders, oversized ladders. I know in the past we've had an issue last year that came up while we were doing our sweeps during the week of a structure that was considered a ladder by the builder. We said it wasn't. Ultimately, they removed it, and I know it caused quite a stir on social media. It was a 2x4 platform that was created. Obviously, there's a public safety concern. There is also a fairness element, and so that was removed. To the extent that Parks and Parkways will seize these items on the parade route when we're doing our sweeps, we'll speak with the parade goers if they're present. Otherwise, we'll remove these items. Enclosed tents, scaffolding, ropes, spray paint, and other similar items to create a barricade or otherwise obstruct passage along public property. The fastening of ladders together. All of these are prohibited items, including portable toilets. None of these items should be on the parade route, nor should these practices be seen on the parade route. So that's the what. If you guys, do you all have any comments about that?
I guess I have a question, because this is always the eternal debate about how much discretion to try and give to directors, but also trying to tighten things up. So if we have somebody who has literally built a platform, that's not a ladder, it's not an ice chest, it's not a grill. Do we need to amend this ordinance to make those things a little bit clearer, or do you think there's enough language in here that gives you the requisite amount of flexibility?
So that's a good question. I mean, in years past, like last year, it was determined not to be a ladder because it wasn't something that was purchased at a store, and so we removed it. I mean, I don't know if, just reading the ordinance really quickly, if it speaks to platforms, it speaks to scaffolding and other structures. I know there is a section in here about public safety, but that really speaks to portable toilets. I know that generally when there have been structures, scaffolding, or other large items, NOPD and Parkways in a limited capacity has been able to remove these structures. If there's a need, there may be a need to define what a ladder is or a certain height, because some folks have come out with extension ladders that are 20 feet high, and obviously there's a public safety component there, and also to the extent that the intent of this ordinance was for speaks to fairness, there's that component there. It seems that my predecessor and a number of others amended this ordinance in 2020 to add additional language, so that may be needed in the future. The WIN, which is the highlighted section, 4 hours before the start of the parade, this past Friday, Parks and Parkways performed sweeps along the Uptown Parade Route, St. Charles and Napoleon, from the Expressway to Napoleon and down to Magazine, and had a rather successful engagement with parade goers. We started early, 7 a.m. We were consistent. We increased it to 4 small teams. We determined that we didn't need to bring dump bodies. We just had pickup trucks, and really just engaging the people on the route who were out early and explaining to them that we intended to keep the neutral grounds clear of every item. No more folding of items next to you, no more chairs to sit in. We are sticking to the language of the ordinance. And in the past, there have been different approaches. We've gone out and just started to dispose of items. I know that the ordinance speaks to all personal items may be removed by the Department of Parks and Parkways or sanitation. Our approach this year was really just to engage everyone, and we were able to have everyone move to the sidewalk or return items to their vehicles or to their homes. A lot of folks are just coming out in front of their homes 6, 7, 8 hours early. And so what we encountered on Friday, and I know it was a much less crowded day than what we'll encounter starting on Wednesday, is everyone was complying, and we were able to keep the neutral grounds clear. The streetcars were running, so there absolutely was a public safety component there where people weren't having to hold their spot between passing vehicles and passing streetcars. So we were, and the public was reasonable with us. They understood that, to a certain extent, they're out there because they feel that other people are going to get that spot if they don't get it. But if everyone is off of the neutral ground, then it worked. And so we ran into a little bit of a hiccup around 12:30. So 4 hours before the parade on Friday was, I believe, 1:30. And closer to 12:30 or 1, the barricade had started to come out from NOPD barricade detail. And what we found was in the section between Louisiana and Napoleon in particular, where there's a lot of folks setting up early, once one group started to move, then it was like, an airbag within a matter of like a few minutes. Everyone was there. But up until that point, we were able to continue to speak with folks and let them know that, hey, we're not here to ruin your experience. We're not here to throw away your ladders. But if the items remain on the neutral ground, we will, follow the ordinance as it's written. One interesting result that we found on Friday is that people were still determined to hold their spots, and so you had individuals just standing in the neutral ground, holding their spot 5-6 hours ahead of the parade route. So we are not there to just standing. And they said, can we have a chair? And we said, look, if we give you a chair, then you'll have your ice chest next to you. And so no items, no personal items on the neutral ground. And so it was almost like an art installation of humans evenly spaced between Magazine and St. Charles on Napoleon in particular. So those of you who are standing out there, you know who you are.
Was that directed precisely at Councilmember Green, or?
I don't believe we encountered you out there, Councilmember Green. And there's always a certain amount of ingenuity when it comes to, what is allowed and what isn't allowed. and it was all, like I said, everyone was willing to comply and work with us. We're not out there to enforce the ordinance. We're out there to ensure that people are complying with this ordinance that is a public safety matter. One gentleman asked, well, if the department is preventing him from bringing his yoga mat out to the neutral ground to do yoga, and I said, sir, you have every right to be out here standing. It's public space, but if you have your yoga mat, I want to be seeing you performing your yoga routine. That's what I got.
You need to write a book about this.
I know this is I regret, mentioning that
Can we
here on
maybe
the dais.
just like
but
set up
there
a
we go.
social media account for you, Mike, during all this stuff?
I-
I know you document some of this, but seriously, like, to show what you have to deal with might be helpful a little bit.
Yeah, there was an interaction 2 years ago that made its rounds. We were looking to prevent those types of interactions. We did have Lieutenant Waldron and 2 NOPD officers out there. Their presence was definitely helpful. We didn't find that there was much interaction between NOPD and parade goers on Friday, although we'll see what happens on Wednesday and Thursday.
Yeah, I spoke to Lieutenant Waldron, and he said it was very successful, that y'all did a really good job, and he's happy to work with y'all again. I mean, what this tells me is that there's compliance, and you're not going to have those bad interactions that you had in the past if you're treating everybody equally.
And it's also about messaging from you all on the council, from the NOLA Ready team. What's up on the screen is a reminder that is an incredible website to copy to your phone's homepage, ready.nola.gov. If you just go to ready.nola.gov, it immediately directs you to all of the Mardi Gras guidance about parade, the route-wise schedule, what you to bring, focus on areas for the health department, aid stations, bathroom locations. It's all there. It's an incredible tool. And so we, in addition to telling people about keeping off of the neutral ground in compliance with this ordinance, we're focusing on getting the word out about that website.
Did you issue any citations? I do know there was a porta potty on a U-Haul, which we see all the time, unfortunately. Did y'all issue any citations this year, or you not yet?
We don't have citation issuing authority. If that's something that the council wants to contemplate in the future, I'd recommend that you also throw in the ability to issue citations for neutral ground parking, but that's for another day.
So where it says a fine of $250 per day shall be assessed, that's NOPD would be writing that citation?
I'm not exactly sure. I know that the Department of Safety and Permits is tied to that language in the ordinance, but I can get clarification from you on that. As I mentioned earlier, on Friday we were out there ahead of the 2 p.m. Allowance for setting up on the neutral ground. And what we found on the weekends, especially with the earlier parade times, the setup time for a Saturday morning parade would be, 6, 7 in the morning. And so if people are out there that early, then, they have a right to be there. Our focus has been on the weekdays and on the uptown routes. As for this coming Saturday with Endymion, I know that we have a regular grass cutting cycle on Canal Street, Carrollton Avenue, Orleans Avenue, and also, I believe, Napoleon Uptown. And so we will have clearing teams if needed for areas along Orleans Avenue in particular. With that parade being on Saturday, no one should be out there on Wednesday or Thursday when we're cutting the grass, or even Friday, although I'm sure there may be some folks out there. So, and if we need assistance from public safety officers to address the clearing of those areas so that our grass cutting teams can do their jobs, we'll make sure that that's there. And I believe that was it. I know I had a conversation with Councilmember Morell and you, Councilmember Harris, last year in particular, as much of this is your district. So, just getting the messaging out, ready.nola.gov, for public safety and fairness reasons. We'll see what we encounter on Wednesday. believe that's the end of my slide. So if that concludes my presentation, if you have any questions.
No, Michael, thank you. I know you're tired. I do have a couple questions. The first is, do we have signage, or do y'all need signage that says 4 hours before parade you can't do?
So that was contemplated this year. We ultimately didn't put up signage. I know that the Department of Revenue has used signage in the past on St. Claude to notify the public of certain rules. This is a rather long ordinance, possibly for some items that are brought to the neutral ground that may be useful in the future, but so far, as I mentioned, we haven't installed signage, and it wasn't really needed on Friday. It was just regular sweeps back and forth and just communicating with the public. Again, our engagement with folks on the neutral ground on Friday was almost entirely pleasant. I mean, everyone understood. As long as everyone is complying, it seems to work, but that's not always easy.
And then I do have to ask you about the incident. I think it was during Cleopatra with the porta potty that hit an oak tree and fell over.
Mm-hmm.
I'm told that somebody was actually in the porta potty when it tipped over. How did that happen? Was the porta potty out of compliance? Do you know? Have you seen the video?
I've seen the video, and so that turn at Jefferson and Magazine, it's actually the same tree that Pygmalion hit last year, and ahead of the incident last year with Pygmalion, we had done our trimming since October up until Mardi Gras time. Our teams had gone out with Kern Studios and done a follow-up inspection to ensure appropriate clearance. And the float last year, we spoke with the float organizer of Pygmalion, and there was driver error. It was a wide turn. There are also larger floats, and so that's the same thing that happened this year with Cleopatra. It was actually a quad float, so it was tandem times 2. So it was 4 sections of a float, and my understanding is that this is the first time that large float made that turn. So it's a tight turn from Jefferson to Magazine, and it's a tight turn from Magazine to Napoleon. And so we've been in touch with NOPD, with NOSEP, with Kern Studios, and are aware of the remaining parades that have tandem floats at that turn. And so we'll ensure that the appropriate float owners, whether it's Kern or others, have personnel at that turn to ensure that the tandem floats are able to make that turn. Even without the branch that we removed last year, this year, the section of the tree that the Cleopatra float hit was basically, the float, when it made the turn, was up against the curb.
Yeah.
And so it's just a very large float. So one thing that we're contemplating for subsequent years is at those intersections, Jefferson to Magazine and Magazine to Napoleon, that we not have tandem floats at those locations. Mm-hmm. If over the years there has been more of a movement of parades back to Jefferson and Magazine, but if it is a situation where tandem floats are not making those turns, we'll ensure that the tree canopy is not being hit, even though the tree canopy is far outside of the area where the floats are passing.
Yeah, I mean, again, I said this earlier, but Councilmember Green and I are the biggest tree huggers on this council, and that was a big limb, and the fact that somebody put a porta potty on top of a float just seems strange to me. And I've ridden before, and I've never seen one on the top of a float. But
I can't speak to the compliance of the float. I mean, under the impression that it was within compliance of the height restrictions. I spoke with our team of arborists, and there's no more trimming that we can do on that tree. We will not remove the tree.
No, you shouldn't.
And so the solution is to address the size of the floats that are making that turn. And obviously, it's the health of the tree, the health of the safety of the riders, but also important is the delays that it caused to public safety officials and the sanitation workers, and extending everyone's night by a certain amount of time. So we are working to ensure that the parade organizers address that, and any assistance that we as a department can offer, we're glad to provide that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Green?
You're a very reserved person in this regard. You're basically saying we can't do 4 tandem floats in the city. I mean, which is fine. If
Just
that's
not
the
at those
case,
intersections. Those are tight turns.
I know. So, in other words, where would we be able to do it? I guess if they started on Napoleon.
If they started
for
at
example.
Napoleon,
Right.
at Chapatulas, and for instance, if a particular parade did not want to change, because my understanding is that not all the parades, in talking with the current team, we can't have all the crews start at Napoleon, so some are staggered and start at Jefferson. And so if you have, the vast majority of Muses floats are singles, for example, but they have one tandem. If that tandem wants to start, I'm just using them as for instance, if that tandem wanted to start at Napoleon and the rest of the parade starts at Jefferson and is able to make those 2 turns, and then that tandem joins in, there are a number of options to consider, but our focus is on reducing or eliminating potentially tandem floats from those 2 turns, because it's not just that one turn, it's also the turn from Magazine to Napoleon, from what I understand.
Yep, no.
So if you were to alert the crews, you'd be alerting the crews that if you have a 4 tandem float, whatever the title would be,
So-
that you need to not be at Jefferson to start. And that would be something that Councilmember Harris, if there was legislation required, would lead. Councilmember Caruso or Harris. But the bottom line is that you can kind of put that word out now, because people see this, and sometimes the media says that for next year, if you have a 4 tandem float, you can't start at Jefferson and
Yeah,
Magazine.
and I'm sorry to cut you off. We're not taking the lead on solutions here, but we definitely want to be a part of the solution to ensure that whoever ultimately needs to make the decision, if it's NOPD, the Mayor's Mardi Gras Advisory Council, the council, and the crews themselves, to come up with a solution. I mean, the tractor drivers are the ones that know these turns the best, and the information that I have is just in speaking with our contacts at Kern Studios, who manage the majority of these parades. And so there are a number of solutions to consider, and I think that we can find a reasonable compromise for next year. But moving forward, going into the next
Weekend.
7 days of Mardi Gras, we've identified the floats that are at those locations that are tandem or triples or quads, and we'll be in touch with the appropriate organizers to ensure that there's no issues.
We have one public comment, I know.
This is from Clifford Dugar. He says ladders, even when they adhere to the 6-foot rule, which is seldom, is ruining the parade experience for everyone that doesn't have a ladder. Ladders should be in the back, not the front. That's the purpose of having a ladder. Give the rest of the kids a break. They literally form a wall in some areas on Carrollton, whether connected or not. I wish they were forbidden.
All right, Anita. Thank you, Michael. Get some rest. I'm going to go ahead and move to adjourn.
Thank you all.
Councilmember Green seconds. And we are adjourned. Thank you.